Jace sat inside the old stone ruins of a forgotten Alari temple, his back against a broken pillar while firelight danced across cracked walls. The scent of smoke and blood still lingered in the air, but here there was a short moment of quiet. Soraka sat across from him, her silver skin glowing faintly in the dark, her violet eyes never leaving his face. Around them, a handful of Alari survivors tended to wounds and whispered in hushed voices. These were not warriors. They were farmers, singers, teachers, and yet they had followed Soraka here, placing their lives in the hands of the one who had fought with nothing but fists. Jace winced as he tightened the bandage around his ribs. His arm ached from the brutal fight, but he didn't complain. Pain was nothing new. What troubled him more was the weight of silence. He looked at Soraka and broke it. "You said no help is coming. Is that true?" She nodded slowly. The Zerul struck hard. "They destroyed your fleet's main relay. Your distress call never left orbit. We're alone." Earth didn't know. That meant no reinforcements, no backup, just him and a scattered group of alien civilians on a dying world. "Then we fight," he said simply. "We train, we prepare, and we hit them before they finish the job." Tilted her head. "With what weapons? What army? We'll make do," Jace answered. "That's what humans do best. We survive, we adapt. And when someone pushes us too far, we push back harder." She looked at him closely, and something in her gaze shifted. It was not surprise, it was respect. She leaned forward. "Speak like a leader, but you are only one man." Jace met her eyes. "One man is all it takes to light a fire. If I fall, someone else picks it up. That's how we fight." Soraka stood and walked to the temple's broken doorway, looking out at the burning valley. The Alari have always avoided war. They chose peace, beauty, growth. But peace cannot exist when monsters come with blades. If we don't change, we die. "Then change starts now," Jace said, standing slowly. "How many people do you have who can still move? Still stand?" 200, maybe less, she replied. "They are afraid." "They don't have to be fearless," Jace said. "Right. They just need something to believe in. Give me time. I'll teach them how to fight." Soraka turned to face him fully, a strange warmth in her voice. "And what of you? Will you lead them?" "I didn't come here to lead," Jace said quietly. "I came here to stop monsters. But if leading is what it takes, then yeah, I'll do it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Soraka stepped closer and placed her hand gently on his chest, right over the bandaged wound. "You burn like fire, Jace of Earth," she whispered. "And fire, when fed, becomes something that no darkness can stop." Jace looked at her, saw strength beneath the grace, saw a woman who had been forced to choose war when all she wanted was peace. "Then let's light the fire," he said. Outside, the stars shimmered above the smoke, and the wind carried the first breath of something new. Not peace, not yet, but the start of resistance. The spark before the storm. Over the next 6 days, the ruins of the temple turned into a training ground, and the Alari began to change. Under Jace's command, soft hands learned to hold weapons, weak bodies grew stronger, and frightened eyes learned to focus. Jace taught them how to move low, how to strike first, how to fight smart and stay alive. He broke them into squads, taught them human combat drills, and made them train until their muscles ached. At first they stumbled, they hesitated, but every failure was a lesson, and Jace never yelled. He showed, corrected, and pushed them harder, until even the quietest ones began to believe they could fight. Soraka fought beside them every day, never asking for rest. She was not just their leader, no, she was their shield. Jace watched her carefully, noting the way the others looked to her, trusted her, followed her. She moved with grace, but struck. With strength, she sparred with Jace, her blows were fast and sharp, and even when he won, it wasn't easy. He respected her not just for her skills, but for her fire. The Alari began calling themselves the Fireborn, in honor of the human, who had taught them to fight with flame in their hearts. At night, around the fires, They told stories of how Jace had killed Zerul with nothing but his fists. The younger ones stared at him with wide eyes. Some feared him. Others wanted to be like him. Jace didn't care about the stories. He only cared about the mission, make them strong enough to survive. Soon, they launched their first raid. A Zerul patrol camped near a cliff pass. Jace led a team of 20. They struck in silence, using speed and shadows. 2 Alari died, but the rest survived. More importantly, they won. They returned with stolen weapons, supplies, and maps. The next night, they hit another camp, then another. Each time they moved faster, struck harder. The Zerul began to take notice. They sent stronger patrols. One evening, on the way back from a raid, Jace and Soraka were ambushed. 10 Zerul hunters surrounded them. The fight was brutal. Jace's rifle overheated and jammed. He dropped it and fought with fists and elbows, breaking bones and dodging claws. Soraka fought beside him using a curved blade, her move swift and deadly. Jace took a deep slash across his ribs, and his right arm went numb from a crushing blow. He almost fell, but Soraka caught him, pulled him back, and cut down the last hunter with a cry that echoed through the trees. Blood poured from Jace's side as he dropped to his knees. "I thought I told you not to follow me," he said through clenched teeth. "I go where you go," Soraka answered, holding him close, her hand pressed to his wound. "You're hurt." "I've had worse," Jace whispered, but his face was pale. "You should have run." "I will never leave you," she said, her voice low and fierce. Jace looked up into her eyes, his pain fading just a little. "Then don't," he said. She leaned in, and for the first time, their lips met blood. Sweat and fire between them. It was not soft. It was not gentle. But it was real. In the days that followed, the Fireborn fought harder, trained longer, and moved faster. They saw that their leaders bled beside them, fought beside them, and never gave up. Hope began to rise like smoke from the ruins. And Jace, once just a stranded soldier, had become more than a man to them. He had become the spark that lit the war. ChatGPT said word of the Fireborn spread far beyond the burned valley and deep into the ears of the enemy. The Zerul, once certain of victory, now felt fear. Their patrols kept vanishing. Their outposts were being burned in the night. A human, they said, was behind it, a fighter with no claws, no armor, no mercy. They called him Death Without Claws. But this fear only pushed their leader, Warlord Kraksek, to strike harder. He gathered his full force, nearly 20,000 strong, and prepared to crush the last Alari city where Soraka and the Fireborn had made their base. From a high tower, Jace watched the dust rise from the south. It wasn't smoke. It was an army marching, a wave of monsters. Too many, he clenched his fists. Behind him, Soraka stood with her captains, her face calm but her eyes full of worry. "If they reach us, we fall," she said. "We cannot win a direct fight." Jace turned to her. "Then we don't fight their way. We don't wait. We strike first." The room went quiet. "Strike?" Captain asked. "With what?" "We are outnumbered 100 to 1. Then we hit their brain," Jace said. "We sneak into their command camp and cut off the head. No leader, no orders. That gives us time." Some said it was suicide. Others feared the risk. But Soraka looked at Jace, nodded once, and said, "We follow you." That night, under cover of clouds and silence, Jace led a team of 30 deep into enemy land. They crawled through canyons, moved through shadows, and waited for the right moment. The Zerul camp was massive, filled with fires, beasts, and war. Machines. But Jace didn't plan to fight them all. He planned to strike where it hurt. Explosives stolen from old human tech were planted across the camp fuel tanks, command towers, and weapon storage. Every second felt like a heartbeat before a storm. Then Jace gave the signal. Fire erupted across the camp. Explosions tore through supplies. Towers fell. Screams echoed as the Zerul scattered in confusion. And through the flames, the Fireborn struck fast, cutting down commanders and vanishing into the dark. It wasn't a total victory, but it was a wound won deep enough to slow the march. Jace limped back to the city, with smoke still clinging to his clothes. The Fireborn cheered his return, but he didn't smile. He had seen the size of the army. The delay wouldn't stop them forever. They would come, and when they did, it would be the end if they weren't ready. In the days that followed, Jace and Soraka prepared for the storm. Walls were reinforced, traps were laid. Every fighter was trained again and again. Children were hidden. The city no longer feared war. They were ready for it. On the last night, before the enemy's arrival, Jace stood beside Soraka on the tower again. She looked at the stars and whispered, "If this is the end, I'm glad it is with you." Jace reached for her hand and said, "It's not the end. It's the beginning of the fight that matters." And beneath the stars, while the ground rumbled from marching giants, the last hope of a dying world burned like a fire that refused to go out. ChatGPT said, "The sky turned red as the Zero army appeared on the horizon. A moving wall of bone-armored beasts, war machines, and smoke-belching crawlers that shook the earth with every step." Inside the last Alari city, the Fireborn stood ready behind walls, reinforced with scrap metal, plasma turrets, and traps made from salvaged parts. Jace walked along the front line, checking weapons, giving orders, meeting every eye with a steady look that said, "Stand your ground." Soraka stood beside him in her silver armor, her long braid tied back, her face calm but fierce. He had become not just a leader of her people, but a warrior who would die for them. Jace could feel the tension in the air, fear, yes, but not the same kind that once made the Alari hide. This fear was sharp, focused, and tied to something stronger, the will to survive. As the enemy approached, the first blasts lit up the sky. The ground shook as the Zero fired plasma cannons at the outer walls. Explosions thundered, and pieces of stone flew through the air, but the Fireborn held. They answered with turret fire and homemade missiles, catching the attackers in fire and smoke. Jace fought at the front, his rifle blazing until it overheated. When it failed, he tossed it aside and grabbed a metal pipe. He charged into the breach, swinging hard, breaking bones and dodging claws. Beside him, Soraka struck with her blade, her movements fast and deadly, her armor shining through the dust. Wave after wave of Zero came, and each time they were pushed back, but it wasn't enough. The enemy was too many. The walls were starting to crack. Explosions tore holes in their defenses. The Fireborn were falling one by one. Jace's arm was already bleeding from a deep cut. His ribs screamed with every breath, but he kept moving, kept fighting. At one point, he found himself surrounded 5-0, closing in. His legs were weak, but he didn't run. He slammed one in the face, ducked under another's claw, drove his fist into its gut, then rolled free and kicked one into a pit trap. He roared with fury, and the last two backed off uncertain. That moment saved his life. But even with that, fire. Jace knew the truth. They couldn't win this battle. Not here, not like this. It had slowed the enemy, but not stopped them. Soraka reached him, blood on her face, her armor cracked. "Can't hold them," she said, breathing hard. "They're breaking through." Jace nodded, wiping sweat and blood from his eyes. "We need to finish this. No more holding ground. We end it now." She stared at him. "You mean the starport?" "It's the only chance," he said. Beneath the city, hidden under old rubble, was an ancient starport with a prototype ship, one still able to fly. Powered by a core that could burn half the mountain if triggered. They had kept it secret as a last option. Now, that option had come. "We load the pulse bomb," Jace said. "We take it straight into the hive. Kill the command. Break their spine." Soraka looked at him, her eyes full of pain and fire. "You'll die," maybe Jace said. "But they'll die." "With me?" She didn't answer. Not at first. Then, without a word, she grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the tunnels below the city. Together, they made their way through the smoke, fire falling from the sky, screams echoing through the streets. Behind them, the last of the Fireborn held the line as long as they could. In the dark of the tunnel, under the roar of a world burning, Jace and Soraka reached the ship, their final weapon and their final hope. ChatGPT said, "Inside the hidden chamber beneath the city, The old starship stood waiting, covered in dust and scars from a forgotten time. Jace stepped into the cockpit, his face pale from blood loss, his movements stiff, but his mind clear. Quickly ran checks on the systems, his fingers dancing across cracked controls while warning lights flashed red. The pulse bomb, a powerful energy weapon made to destroy entire cities, was already loaded and armed, resting in the ship's cargo bay. Soraka entered behind him, her silver armor dented, her long braids soaked in ash and sweat. She placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and warm. "You're not doing this alone," she said. "I fight with you." Jace turned, his eyes sharp. "If we both go, there's no one left to lead the others." Soraka stepped closer. "There will be nothing left if this fails. Zero will wipe out everyone. Let me stand beside you one last time." For a moment, Jace wanted to argue, to stop her, but he saw in her eyes that she had already made her choice. She wasn't just doing this for him. She was doing it for her people, for the Fireborn, and for the future they had tried to protect. So he nodded once, and they climbed into the pilot seats together. The ship roared to life, engines shaking. The ground as it lifted off through a crumbling shaft in the ceiling. Outside, the city was burning. The walls had fallen, Fireborn warriors fought street by street, and the Zero War were closing in on the last holdouts. But above the chaos, the ship soared into the red sky, cutting through fire and smoke like a falling blade. The Zerul saw it too late. Anti-air weapons fired from the enemy ranks, streaks of light racing toward the ship. Jace dodged, swerving through the blasts, even as the hull took hits, and alarms screamed. Soraka manned the gun turret, firing back, with precision, clearing a path as they raced toward the Zerul hive at the edge of the crater. The hive was a massive fortress of bone and metal, pulsing with energy, guarded by towers and flying beasts. Jace flew straight into the heart of it, diving low, dodging blasts, flying faster than anyone thought possible. The moment they reached the core, Soraka stood and moved to the bomb controls. She began the countdown, her fingers steady. 10 minutes until detonation, she said. Enough time to escape if... We move now. Jace looked at her, then at... The escape pod docked near the back. He said nothing. Instead, he turned and slammed the release. The escape pod door opened, and in one fast motion, he grabbed Soraka and pushed her inside. She shouted in shock, trying to fight back, but he was stronger. "What are you doing?" she yelled. "Saving what matters," Jace said, sealing the pod door. "You still have a world to protect. You still have a people. And you are my mate," she cried, her fists pounding on the glass. "I stay with you." Jace placed his palm against the glass, his voice calm. "Live for me. That's all I ask." And before she could stop him, the pod launched. Soraka screamed as it shot through the smoke, away from the hive, away from him. Inside the ship, Jace turned back to the cockpit. He was alone now, but he didn't feel fear. He felt peace. His hands rested on the controls as the timer ticked down. 5 minutes. 4, he thought of Earth, of his old squad, a circus. Eyes when she had first seen him fight, of fire, of blood, of hope. Then, as the pulse bomb reached its final second, he whispered for the Fireborn. The blast was like a new sun being born, swallowing the hive in light, tearing the earth apart. The shockwave rolled for miles, flattening zero lines, silencing their roars forever. And in that light, Jace Render vanished, but not as a soldier, not as a survivor. He vanished as a legend. The ground shook for miles as the pulse bomb exploded, turning the heart of the Zero hive into a blinding sun of white fire. The sky cracked with light, the wind howled like a scream, and the entire battlefield was swallowed by a wave of energy. So powerful it shattered stone, vaporized metal, and left silence in its wake. The Zerul army, once proud and unstoppable, was broken in an instant. Their leaders, their core hive, their command lines, all gone. The beasts that remained scattered. In panic, no longer united, no longer driven by orders. Some fled into the mountains. Others dropped their weapons and fell to their knees, stunned by the sudden loss of their war mind. From the last Alari city, the Fireborn watched in awe and sorrow as the sky turned to gold and then to ash. Many fell to the ground, crying or holding each other. They knew what the explosion meant. Jace was gone. He had done it, sacrificed himself to end the war, but the cost was heavy. Sarika's escape pod crashed near the city gates, burned and broken. The Fireborn rushed to it, pried the hatch open, and pulled her out. She was alive, barely. Her armor was scorched, her body covered in bruises and cuts, but her spirit still burned. As soon as she opened her eyes, she asked only one thing. Did it work? When they told her the Zeril hive was destroyed, she closed her eyes and whispered Jace's name. For days after the explosion, no one found his body. The blast had torn through everything. Many believed he had died in the fire. Some said the light had carried him away to the stars. Others whispered that his spirit now watched over the valley, keeping it safe. Soraka did not speak much during those days. She walked through the city, helping the wounded, lifting stones, rebuilding homes. But every night she returned to the same hilltop, the one where she had first seen him. Fight with bare hands, and the red Sandan stared at the sky. One evening, as the suns dipped low and the stars began to shine, a patrol came back from the crater. They carried something in a stretcher, wrapped in scorched cloth, heavy and still. Soraka rushed to them, heart pounding. When they unwrapped it, she fell to her knees. It was Jace, burned, broken, but alive. Somehow, through will or luck or something more, he had survived the fire. His body was weak, bones cracked, but his heart still beat. She held him in her arms as the Fireborn gathered around them, silent with wonder. He opened his eyes slowly, saw her face, and smiled. "Told you I'd stay in the fight," he whispered, "right?" She wept, her tears falling onto his skin. "You fool," she said, her voice shaking. "You stubborn, reckless, beautiful fool. You said you'd never leave," he murmured, "so I had to come back." That night, under the stars, with firelight glowing in the distance and the sounds of rebuilding rising from the valley below, Asirika kissed him, gently this time, her lips trembling with joy and sorrow. And Jace, bruised and breathing, returned. The kiss, feeling more alive in that moment than ever before. Around them, the Fireborn raised their fists to the sky, not in grief, but in victory. The war was over. And the man who had fought barehanded in the sand had returned not just a hero, but a symbol of something greater. Not just for the Alari, but for all who believed that courage could burn brighter than fear.